Hey guys, welcome back to Automate with Rakesh. In this video, we are going to learn how can I use orchestrator HTTP request activity, and using this, how can I create an asset in the orchestrator using the activity. Now for this, the very first thing is whatever your URL is, you might be using a development URL or maybe stage or prod or maybe the community edition. Until this orchestrator that you see, you copy this URL. Go to a new tab and paste it, and here you simply write swagger/index.html. okay, swagger/index.html. this is what you need to write, and by doing this, this will take you to Swagger page. Now what is the Swagger page? This is the page where you have the API links. So API is nothing but it's just a URL, so you need those definitions, those URLs from this page. This is one of the source. There are also multiple sources, but this is one of the source where you can find the API URLs. Now here we are focused on assets, to create an asset. Let me go to assets. So you see multiple things: account, directory service, licensing, lot of things are there. So here we will just learn about assets now. Click on assets. Here there are multiple things. If you read the very first one, it tells you using this you will be able to create an asset. If you look at the second one, get a single asset based on its ID, edit an asset, delete an asset. So a lot of things we can do using these API links or the API URLs. Okay, this is the very first thing. You open swagger.com, swagger index.html. So once you have this, this is the endpoint. Okay, here you get this endpoint. Do you see OData /asset? This is the endpoint. Endpoint means what? In this activity, it asks, hey, you have to provide the endpoint. Endpoint is nothing but it's kind of a URL. It's more like a URL for the API call. Now the very first thing, we will copy this OData assets and we can paste it. This is one way. Let me also show you another way. There is a site called postman.uipath.rocks. Do you see? postman.uipath.rocks. Go to this site, just hit enter. Okay, now this is the site which will help you in a much better way. So I would recommend you to go to postman.uipath.rocks, and here there is something called assets. Click on assets. Okay, now here our focus is to create a text asset. So click on create, and here you have this URL. Okay, so all you need, ensure your UiPath Studio is connected. Okay, first check that. If your UiPath Studio is not connected, then this will not work because it is making a call to orchestrator. So first thing, you ensure your UiPath Studio is connected. For example, for me, if you see, it has a green dot, that means it's connected. Great. Okay, this is first thing you need to ensure. Now once it is connected, the next thing, where would you like to create the asset? It is highly possible you might have multiple folders. You might be having shared itself, and you may also have multiple folders like me. For example, if you see, I have a IT folder created. Wherever you would like to create, ensure your UiPath Studio is also connected there. For example, if you click here, it shows me all the three different folders: IT, Rakesh, and then shared. So here my goal is to create the asset in the shared folder. I want to create an asset in the shared folder. It could be any other folder, doesn't matter. So wherever it is, ensure your UiPath is just connected to that folder. Okay, these are the prerequisites. Now the very first step that we will do, we will get that endpoint. Endpoint means, anytime you hear this word endpoint, means just the URL, API URL. Okay, this is the endpoint. So I'm going to copy. I don't need all of this. Why? Because my UiPath Studio is already connected. You can see there is a green dot through the UiPath assistant is already connected. So it is authorized. That means my application is authorized to do something on the orchestrator. Okay, so you don't need the entire URL. All you do, go to this postman.uipath.rocks, click on asset create, and all you do is copy OData /assets. Okay, this is the first step. Slowly we will learn. So go ahead and put it inside double quote, paste. Okay, this is the first step done. Pretty simple one. Okay, Now the next thing that we need, orchestrator folder path. Okay, now orchestrator folder path is nothing but shade. I'm going to click on this drop down and hit on shade. You don't have to write. Sometimes if you are using an older version of UiPath orchestrator, you may put a double quote and write shade IT, whatever your folder name, put a double quote and write. But in the newer one, when I tried the double quote, it did not work. I have to really select from the drop down the appropriate folder. Okay, this is another point. So done. Next thing, in the Swagger we have seen to create an asset, you have to do a post. Post means you have to send some data. For example, your asset will have a name. It'll have some name. For example, test1, test2, some name you will have the asset name. When you create an asset, what are the required parameters for you to create an asset? For example, if you are in the orchestrator and I'm asking you create an asset, so you will click on add asset, create a new asset, and then in this one you have to provide asset name. Name is very important, right? And then you have to select the type. Is it text type, it is integer type, is it credential type? This is also important. You may or may not provide a description, that is optional. Okay, now the next thing is the value of the text. The value of the text, like what is the text you would like to store, that is also important. So these are a couple of mandatory things that you have to provide. Now these things are called payloads. What is this called? Payload means you are sending some data to orchestrator. Payload, this is known as payload. Okay, now how to write the payload and what you have to do. If you see the Swagger, there is something called post. It is written post. Okay, so that means you have to do a post. The very first thing we will select here, method as post. Okay, method as post, and then the relative endpoint is done, JSON payload. Now how to design this JSON payload? Let's see that. This is important. This is actually important. Now for this, let me go back and slightly scroll down in the create. Okay, go to the create and scroll down. Here you have the payload. Okay, this is the payload. I'll copy this payload. It is very important. You copy this payload to a text box. Now what happens? Name. For example, I want to give a name called, I want to create a asset called test1. What is the asset name? Test1. Value scope global. What is the meaning of value scope global? If you see, asset value global, by default it is like this. So when the global value is enabled, every user will receive it unless specifically overridden. So mostly you will create a asset just like that. You don't turn off the global value if not needed. So I'll leave it as global. Okay, value scope global. Value type. What is the value you want to store? For example, value type means this one, the asset type. Okay, the asset, this one type. Would you like to go for a text asset? Would you like to create a credential asset, integer asset? What is it? So whatever it is, you need to mention it here. So here we are going to go for a text asset. So I'll leave it as text. Now this is your actual value that you would like to store. Let's say I would like to store 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to store this number in this asset. Getting it? So if I ask you to do it manually, you generally write it something like this, right? Test1. You will select as text, and here you write the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then probably if you need a description, you will write it here, and then finally you are going to click on create. This is how you manually create it. Now we will see how the HTTP request will help us to do it in the backend. Okay, so everything is done, just the payload designing is important. So let's see how to do it. So I have set all the values. Now to send the payload, it is very important. It has to go as a string. Why it has to go as a string? Let me show you. If I copy this and go to the JSON payload and click on this, expand it and paste it here, you will see after I paste there is an error here. Do you see? Encountered processing expression error, and you will not be able to send this payload like this. You have to send it in a single line. So how do you convert it in single line? And there are a couple of syntaxes that you have to remember. Let me show you that. Let me close this. Go to the notepad, and here I'm going to delete and bring it to the first line. Same thing I will do it for all of them. Okay, and we'll go slightly right. Okay, I brought everything into the single line. Done. Now next thing, wherever you have double quotes, right, you need to remove the double quote, and for the values you have to use single quote. Okay, Now wherever for the key, this is the key and this is the value, right? So for the key, remove the double quote, and for the values, keep a single quote, not double quote. This is what you have to do for all the things. Okay, remove it, put a single quote for the texts. This is something manually you need to do. For the keys, I will remove it, and after the colon is the value, I'll put a single quote. Done. Now my payload is ready. I will just copy this. Okay, copy this and then go here and paste it here. Look at it, how finally it appears. Simple. And all of this has to be kept inside a double quote. Okay, entire value has to be kept inside a double quote. Clear? This is your final way that you are going to keep it and then look at it. Fine. Now let me click on save and my payload is ready. Okay, let's run it and see if the test1 asset currently, if you see my shade, let me cancel this. Yeah, leave the page. Now if I go back, my shade folder is completely empty. Here I would like to create it using the API. So let me simply debug it. Okay, so the compiling is done. Now let's look at the output. Okay, execution has started. Okay, the execution got completed. Okay, now let's go back to Orchestrator. Let's refresh it and you can see a test asset got created. Now let me see a couple of things. Edit, and if I see test1 has come, 1 2 3 4 5 6 has come. Okay, now what I want, I would also like to get some description added in here. I would like to have some description. Now how do I add the description? Okay, so value type. So for description, you can utilize the Swagger. Okay, go to the Swagger and look at how that key is written. So if you see for the description, so this is the key, this is how it is written, description. Okay, description, and you can see name, same thing. So what I will do, I'll copy this description, go back to the HTTP request. Here I'm going to add this description at the end, put a comma, and here I'm going to add the description. Okay, now description is the key and I have to pass some value, so colon, and then single quote I'm saying this is a test asset. Okay, so I'm writing this description, and then let's change the asset name to test2. Let us create another asset called test2. We are not editing a existing asset, rather we are creating a new asset here. Okay, so I'm just telling you how to add a description which was blank in the previous test. So I'm going to hit on save and let me run this. Okay, looks like the execution got completed. Let's go back to Orchestrator. Let's cancel this. Okay, so you can see test2 has come with a description as well. Okay, so for example, if I hit on edit, you can see the description has also come. So you can take the, these are the keys. So whatever keys you would like to update or you would like to utilize, you can definitely take help from the Swagger. So these are the important ones. We got it. Now the next question that comes to our mind, Rakesh, how do I create a credential asset? So I'm going to show you in my next video. So let's move on to our next video.